Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Racha Kodesh. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone, and peace and blessings to the elect. And today we're going to go into the book of Baruch Chapter 4. Once again, continuing from the third chapter. Now, if we take a look, like I mentioned, in this continuation, right, ending off in the third chapter, right, it was making mention about wisdom, right, and how this wisdom, was unable to be acquired by, any of the nations or anybody really, save the Most High, who then bestowed it upon us, right, upon Jacob, as you read in the last few verses here, right. So, running it back from verse 36 in Baruch chapter 3. It says, "He hath found out all the way of knowledge, and hath given it unto Jacob his servant, and to Israel his beloved. Afterward did he shew himself upon earth, and converse with men." So now when you go into Baruch chapter 4 verse 1, as it says, "This is the book of the commandments of God, and the law that endureth forever." And that book contains that wisdom. That is how the Lord, ultimately bestowed that wisdom upon us. Okay. And he had, by having it, comprised and recorded. Okay. Although the scriptures don't encompass all wisdom in the world, but enough as is sufficient for us, in this, at least in this timeline. So as it says, "This is the book of the commandments of God, and the law that endureth forever," which lets you know that the words, the ordinances, the statutes, and the commandments in this book are meant, eternally, right? And in this sense, meaning we have people that say, oh, we can do X, Y, and Z. Typically, your average so-called Christian would say something like that as an excuse to live, lasciviously, or, just basically go after their lusts, whether it's abominable foods or whatever the case is, right? But as it says, it endures forever. So, for really also for those that are so gun-ho, right, Old Testament only Israelites, if you wanted, the law is still there, right? However, the Lord has changed the stipulations, okay? Because if we were strictly under the law, none of us, everything we're doing now would be pointless, right? There would be no way to salvation, because we wouldn't be able to keep those laws perfectly. Anyway, as it says, "All they that keep it shall come to life, but such as leave it shall die." And the scriptures tell us, right, that the wages of sin, because leaving the commandments of the Lord is equivalent to sin or transgressing against the Lord. And the wages or the punishment or reward of sin is death. Okay. Verse 2, "Turn thee, O Jacob," Jacob referring to the Israelites, "and take hold of it. Walk in the presence of the light thereof," right? So walk within the boundaries of the commandments of the words of the Lord. Because if you consider the words of the Lord to be light, walking in the presence of it would be likened unto walking in that path, right? Or that boundary, that thou mayest be illuminated, right? That you become enlightened. So walking meaning like, living after these ways. Verse 3, "Give not thine honor to another, nor the things that are profitable unto thee to a strange nation." See, and this, the blessing, all right, of being the Lord's chosen people, right, of having this heritage, these customs, this is, as the scriptures say in the book of Deuteronomy, our wisdom in the sight of the nations, right? This exalts us and makes us holy above all other nations. All right. And so we are not to, as it says, give the things that are profitable unto us to a strange nation, because the Lord didn't give it to these nations. He gave it to us. But unfortunately, what our people decided to do was to put aside, the most coveted after thing or spot in which these other nations can't even attain. But our people which did obtain it, i.e. the Israelites, put it aside so they can go and join in what these heathens are doing. So you can imagine why the Most High was so upset. O Israel, happy are we, for things that are pleasing to God are made known unto us. And why does that make us happy? Because when you do the things that are pleasing to the Most High, you live. In fact, you live a good life, right? Let's go real quick. There you go. See, make it. This is Proverbs 16:7. When a man's ways please the Lord, he maketh even his enemies to be at peace with him. So what this means is it goes beyond just being your enemies being at peace with you. But as it says, he maketh even his enemies to be at peace with him, which is, in other words, a man whose ways pleases the Lord is going to be so blessed to the point where even his enemies are not going to come against him. Similar to some of the men that or even some women, right? Like Esther, for example. But when we read in the scriptures, you have some Israelites that were in different kingdoms, and yet they were showed favor by the rulers of those kingdoms, which normally would be our adversaries. So an example being Daniel, right? Nehemiah, okay, and many more, right? So going back to Baruch chapter 4, verse 5. And so, right, what are the ways that are how are they made known unto us? By way of these scriptures. So we know how to serve the Lord. No other nation was given the ordinances, keeping the holy days, doing these sacrifices, following these commandments. These are all things the Lord showed us as ways to please him, and then we would be blessed in return. Verse 5, be of good cheer, my people, the memorial of Israel. You were sold to the nations, not for your destruction, but because ye moved the Most High to wrath, ye were delivered unto the enemies. So being sold unto the nations is equivalent to being in captivity, being a slave, right? Because then you're treated like a commodity, and you're sold, you're bought, you're sent here, you're sent there, so on and so forth. But as it's saying here, the Lord didn't have that happen to us so he could destroy us. So in this sense, there's still hope, because it's not that the Lord hated the nation of Israel and that therefore he had us sold unto the nations. But as it says, because he moved God to wrath. So this was a consequence because of your actions. That's why you were delivered into the hands of your enemies. For ye provoked him that made you by sacrificing unto devils, i.e. these idols, these false gods, because that's what they are. The Molech and Baal and all of these things, technically they're not just statues, right? They're not just images, they're demons. Because when these left-handed priests and so on, why do you think they keep on worshiping these deities? Because these deities, i.e. these demons, actually do things, right? These left-handed priests, witches, warlocks, they see things. And yes, they are able to interact with the spiritual world on the left-hand side, right? What I mean is tap into certain, spiritual things that the average individual cannot do. One example being the Magi's of Egypt, as they were coming against Aaron and Moses and Aaron, right, using their left-handed magic to also perform miracles. So yes, it works, all right, but it's not the right-handed side. And the reason it works is because those demons, right, or those idols that these nations worship are actually demons. So yes, they are, if you want to say real, what it means is they exist because they're demons, but they're not true gods. Okay, it's deception at the end of the day. But the problem here is Israel is not supposed to do that, and that's why that provoked the Most High to wrath. It says, and not to God. First commandment, thou shalt not have any other gods before me. Verse 8, ye have forgotten the everlasting God that brought you up, and ye have grieved Jerusalem that nursed you. Yeah, so our people started to go in the ways of the heathen, started to get influenced and left off from the right path. And as it says, ye have grieved Jerusalem, because now judgment came upon us. And as we continue to read on all the way down, Jerusalem becomes like Jerusalem is now personified, right? And let me look this up for you. Personified, which we should know what it means, but anyway. So it says here, personify, represent a quality or concept by a figure in human form. Okay, attribute a personal nature or human characteristics to something non-human. So in other words, Jerusalem being a place, right, in this sense, like the land or the place, is now being spoken of as though it was a person. Okay, that is an example of personification. So when we read, you'll see, for example, as it says, you grieved Jerusalem. Grief is an attribute or a feeling, or I guess you could say like an emotion that living things experience. Land, yes, the earth is living, but technically, right, if you say like the city, it's not really living per se, right? So that's one example there. It says that nursed you, for when she saw the wrath of God coming upon you, she said, hearken, O ye that dwell about Zion. God hath brought upon me great mourning. So this is an example here. Land doesn't speak, right? And it doesn't, it doesn't see anything. So here you're attributing, like human traits to something that's non-human or non-living. But you'll notice oftentimes the scriptures do that. Okay. And they do that, or it does that, to emphasize the point. So these are examples of things that aren't always necessarily literal, but the meaning, right, is still, they're still able to get the point across. And you'll notice a lot of like some of the ancient languages, there was a lot of these kinds of sayings, right? These kinds of adages or proverbs or metaphorical speak, because that way you could make very sensible points, that really hit the nail on the head. Okay. That's why today you have what are called like expressions. Somebody says break a leg, it doesn't mean go and actually break a leg. Okay, but now ask yourself, why do these kinds of expressions exist? Because at some point it was easier to express a concept via an expression than to just use regular words to explain it. So verse 9, it says, for when she saw the wrath of God coming upon you, she said, hearken, O ye that dwell about Zion. Zion being Israel. So those that dwell about are these neighboring nations. And hearken meaning to behold, to look, to see. God hath brought upon me great mourning. For I saw the captivity of my sons and daughters, i.e. the Israelites, which the everlasting brought upon them. With joy did I nourish them, but sent them away with weeping and mourning. Okay, so with how devastating the destruction was, you could imagine that if the land could speak, it would surely be mourning. Okay. Verse 12, let no man rejoice over me, a widow and forsaken of many, who for the sins of my children am left desolate. Right. So because of the iniquity of of Israel, not taking heed to the words of the Lord, we were removed from the land. Okay. And now the land, which at one point was full of Israelites, was full of people. You would have the 3 times a year that we would all gather at Jerusalem, keep the holy days. All of those times were now gone because the Lord was angry and he brought wrath upon us, because they departed from the law of God. Verse 13, they knew not his statutes, nor walked in the ways of his commandments. When it says they knew not his statutes, it doesn't mean that they didn't actually know, okay, the statutes of the Lord. Okay, but what it means is they didn't follow it. Okay, they didn't keep it. They moved as if they didn't know. Nor walked in the ways of his commandments, nor trod in the paths of discipline in his righteousness. So in other words, they lived as they wanted to. They did as they pleased, completely ignoring the ways the Lord had commanded us to live by. Verse 14, let them that dwell about Zion come, and remember ye the captivity of my sons and daughters, which the everlasting hath brought upon them. So bear witness, for he hath brought a nation upon them from far, a shameless nation, and of a strange language, who neither reverenced old man nor pitied children, or pitied child. And this, at this time, right, were the Babylonians, right, the Neo-Babylonian Empire, the Babylonians. And also, when you go to the book of Daniel, the first chapter, because I mentioned here, right, that the a nation from far, of course, you know, from Babylon all the way in the land of Shinar or Mesopotamia, coming all the way to the west towards Israel, it is a distant land, right? It's pretty far. Okay, as it says, and of a strange language. So now let's go. This is Daniel chapter 1, but the point that I want to go to is let's see. There you go. All right, so this is Daniel 1 and 4. It says, children in whom was no blemish. So what had happened here was, after they had brought this was before the siege, right? And after they had brought the nobility, right, what they did was they looked for the top of the top, the cream of the crop. And Nebuchadnezzar had asked here, as it says, the master of his eunuchs, to basically bring, right, the as it says, the children of Israel of the king's seed, right, of the royal line, and see those that were on point, and basically prepare them so they could learn the language, they could be on point, and they can serve in the court. So as you see here, it says, children in whom was no blemish, but well favored and skillful in all wisdom, and cunning in knowledge and understanding science, and such as had ability in them to stand in the king's palace. So there had to be some way of examining this, right? Either via tests or questions or whatever it is, because how then can you tell who's who, or if they are skillful in wisdom or cunning in knowledge? But as it says here, and whom they might teach the learning and the tongue of the Chaldeans. Now, why would they need to teach them the tongue of the Chaldeans? Because these were Hebrews, and the Chaldeans spoke a different language, right? So going back to Baruch, as it mentions, that these people were of a strange language, right? Who neither reverence old man nor pity child. When a foreign nation comes against you in war, for example, to besiege you, and they break through, they don't see your mother as a mother, like as their mother, right? They don't see your daughter as the same way you see your daughter, or your grandfather. To them, that's an old man, that's a fine ass looking woman, that's a young chick, right? That's how these soldiers are seeing the people over here. So they're not gonna treat them the same way you would. In other words, they don't give a damn. They're gonna kill, they're gonna ravish, right? They're gonna take captive, because they don't have any ties to you or your family or whoever. So it says here, verse 16, these have carried away the dear beloved children of the widow, and left her that was alone, desolate, without daughters, right? And here the children will be Israel, the widow will be Jerusalem. Okay, as it says, and left her that was alone, another way of saying a widow, desolate, without daughters. And daughters, this is like an expression, because the daughters are typically helpers, right? So even if you had a widow, but she had daughters, sons, daughters, but daughters would be the ones that would really be at home helping, whether it's fetching water, going to the market, whatever the case is, preparing all of that stuff. So in other words, what it's saying here is she was stripped, right, of all her children. Verse 17, but what can I help you? For he that brought these plagues upon you will deliver you from the hands of your enemies. So I can't do anything, right? Our hope lies in the same one that brought this destruction upon us. No heathen, no false god, nobody else is going to be able to deliver us from this situation but the Most High. And he is the one that put us in this situation. So your best option is go back to him and appeal, go and beg him for mercy. And, blessed are you, because the Lord is very merciful unto Israel. Verse 18, for he that brought these plagues upon you, which is the Most High, will deliver you from the hands of your enemies. Go your way, my children, go your way, for I am left desolate. I have put off the clothing of peace, and put upon me the sackcloth of my prayer. Okay, and the thing about sackcloth and why it was typically used in a state of mourning or affliction, when you look it up, typically it was made of goat's hair, which is very coarse. And what that does is it irritates the skin. But it's done purposely because it is to make you really feel the affliction, right? You're not trying to feel good in this situation. Okay. It says here, I will cry unto the everlasting in my days. Be of good cheer, O my children, cry unto the Lord, and he will deliver you from the power and hand of the enemies. See? So at the end of the day, that's your only hope. Yes, the Lord brought this upon us, but the only thing you can do is just go back to the Lord and cry for mercy, because he is the only one that will deliver us from these enemies that we are now under. Verse 22, for my hope is in the everlasting, that he will save you, and joy is come unto me from the Holy One, because of the mercy which shall soon come unto you from the everlasting, our Savior. Now, as we go on down, these events, right, particularly in this time, contextually, this is happening, during the time of the Babylonian Empire. But as we keep on reading in Baruch chapter 4, you'll notice that it has these prophetic verses in there as well. Okay, and there are some verses that were applicable back then, but are more prevalent in our time now, as you'll see as we get to the lower verses. So as it's here, it talks about, right, the everlasting Savior, right, and the mercy which shall soon come on to you. So yes, back then the Lord did have mercy upon us, right? When the Persians took down Babylon, the Lord had mercy upon us by putting the spirit on Cyrus to allow us to go back to Jerusalem, to then go and rebuild the temple, rebuild the altar, rebuild everything, so on and so forth. But ultimately, the Lord is going to have mercy upon us, right, in this time, and deliver us from this condition, which is even far worse than the condition we were in back then. And in this time, as it says, which shall soon come to you from the everlasting, our Savior. Okay, and that's going to be in this time when the Most High sends Yahushua, right, the deliverer, to come and deliver us from this captivity. Verse 23, for I sent you out with mourning and weeping, because being taken captive or being removed from the land wasn't a thing done with joy, right? It wasn't like we were doing a getaway or a go away party. No. We were shackled up. But God will give you to me again with joy and gladness forever. See? And ultimately, right, when is this going to happen? This is going to happen going back to Baruch, the 2nd chapter, right? When the Lord gathers his elect and sends them back to the land, as it says, forever. So in this time, when the Lord sends us back, we're no longer going to be removed from that land. Verse 24, like as now the neighbors of Sion have seen your captivity. So now, all these all these heathens, they saw what happened, right? They saw what happened to Israel. They all heard about it, and they all knew about us anyway. But as it says, just as they have seen your captivity, they've seen your downfall, so shall they see shortly your salvation from our God, which shall come upon you with great glory and brightness of the everlasting. Now, when we were allowed to go back and rebuild the temple, yes, it was, a good thing, but it wasn't, something that was done necessarily in this giant, great splendor, right? But when the Lord brings the salvation, right? Because now we're dealing with actual salvation, right? And matter of fact, let's look up this word salvation, see what we got here. not the Salvation Army. See, it says here, salvation, preservation or deliverance from harm, ruin, or loss. Right? Now, when you let's say we analyze the time when the commandment was given for us to go back and rebuild Jerusalem, that wasn't something that necessarily saved us from ruin or harm or loss per se. Yes, we had to go back. Yes, we were able to go back to the land, but our people you had Israelites that decided to stay in Babylon, and ask yourself why. Because they had houses, they had families, they were able to make a living and started living okay. So the true salvation, though it says shortly, we know the scriptures, sometimes it says a short season or shortly, but that surely could be 1,000 years. It could be 500 years. Okay. Because the Most High doesn't even dwell in time, but the length of time to us is not the same to the Lord. So the true salvation that is going to come upon us with great glory and brightness is going to be when the Lord comes back with the chariots, the heavenly hosts, right, pursuant to Daniel 12:1 and many other precepts, and delivers Israel in style. Verse 25, my children, suffer patiently the wrath that is come upon you from God. For thine enemy hath persecuted thee, but shortly thou shalt see his destruction, and shall tread upon his neck. And who is the enemy of Israel? The enemy of Israel are the heathen nations. But when it's singular, the primary enemy of Israel is Esau. Okay, that's like Esau is like the rival, the arch, enemy from the womb. Right? The scriptures talk about how he has had a perpetual hatred, against Israel. So, verse 25, suffer patiently the wrath that has come upon you from God, because soon enough, right? We've been on the low. We've been subject to all forms of inhumane, cruel, and unusual punishments, right? But as it says, shortly we're gonna see his destruction, and that's gonna be when the Most High ultimately brings that judgment to deliver us from this persecuted and low state that we're in. And not only deliverance, but the Lord is going to bring down all of the enemies of Israel to where, as it says, thou shalt tread upon his neck. Not literal per se, but meaning you're going to be in a position of power over them. My delicate ones have gone rough ways, and were taken away as a flock caught of the enemies, right? Which meaning helplessly. They couldn't do anything about it. What's a flock going to do? Verse 27, be of good comfort, O my children, and cry unto God, for ye shall be remembered of him that brought these things upon you. See, and this is why in the beginning it was saying the same one that brought these plagues upon you is the one that's going to deliver you, right? Because we can always bank on the Lord's mercy and his promise that he has made to us. And that's why it says, ye shall be remembered of him, because it's when the Most High remembers that he his mercy abounds even more, that he made that promise to us, that we are still his people at the end of the day. So you'll notice there are times when the Lord has a mind to destroy, but then either a prophet or somebody else will bring to the Lord's remembrance that, Lord, we're still the only ones that will praise you. We're the ones you put your name in, like we are your chosen people. If we're not here, who's going to do this? So remember these things. And then the Lord has mercy. Verse 28, for as it was your mind to go astray from God, so as you had imagined and intended, right? And you went astray from God by leaving the ways that he has set for us and worshiping other gods and following the customs that they had set, so being returned, seek him 10 times more. Okay, so coming back, you got to come harder than before. What's an example? An example is when somebody does something bad, right? How do I even, okay, maybe that's too vague. So let's say you have a man and a woman, and the woman, really does something really bad. Maybe it's not adultery, but it's just something very bad with her behavior, or disrespect or something. And so the man gets upset and he's like, you know what, you out of here. You that's it. Go live with your parents. Go somewhere. And so, whatever, with disappointment, with shame, she's returned back to her family. They're not divorced, but she just returned back to her family. And then over time they get reconciled again. Right? She apologizes and she comes back. Now, this time when she comes back, being that she's back because he is having mercy upon her, she's gonna be, as they say, on her best behavior. Right? So she's gonna go above and beyond to show that remorse, to show that not only am I sorry, but I've changed. So it's not like I'm gonna be doing the same thing that I did before, but I'm gonna, go the extra mile. Okay. Similarly, right? Say even a more modern, or I don't know, a different example would be like if somebody was to get suspended or maybe kicked out of a camp for whatever behavior, going back and then later on say the Lord has mercy and brings the person back into the fold. Guess what? They come back. They got to come back better than before, right? They got to come back on fire to show, okay, the Lord having mercy on me and bringing me back wasn't for nothing, right? So Lord, you have mercy on me. Now this is me, saying thank you. This is what I have to show for that. So hopefully that makes sense. Verse 28 or verse 29, for he that hath brought these plagues upon you shall bring you everlasting joy with your salvation. So the joy that we got at this time wasn't everlasting. It lasted for a while. We rejoiced. We were able to do the rebuilding, but then the Greeks came up into power, and then we met Antiochus Epiphanes, and then that all changed, right? And even prior to that, guess what? Jake started going off again. In between the rebuilding of, in between the temple being built again and the walls being built again, Jake was already going off. As a matter of fact, when you read in the book of Ezra, not even long after the Lord had mercy on us and allowed us to return back, Israel started going off yet again. So that joy wasn't everlasting, not like the one that's going to come or with this deliverance. Okay, verse 30. Take a good heart, meaning be hopeful, right? Be of a good mind. What's the word? Optimistic. O Jerusalem, for he that gave thee that name will comfort thee. Miserable, and how is the Lord going to comfort us? By delivering us, right? By making his presence known again, by returning returning back to us, because for a period of time the Lord turned away himself from Israel. And that's why we were it tells you that in the book of Maccabees, right, that Antiochus Epiphanes was doing all this pillage in the village, but little did he know that it wasn't because he was just this great man, but it was because the Most High was mad at his people for a season. You see? So in this time, the Lord is comforting us now by returning back to us, taking us out of this low state, saying, okay, your punishment is up, and now, it's time for the blessings. Miserable are they that afflicted thee, and rejoiced at thy fall. See, so when we were in this low state, those that took advantage of that, those that what they say, added insult to injury, right? That casted salt into our wounds, it's going to be payback time for them. It says here, miserable are they that afflicted thee, and rejoiced at thy fall. So as we continue to read, one example you can picture in your head is, imagine somebody sees a bear cub by itself, and thinking that this bear cub has been abandoned and is just by itself. They're like mistreating this cub, and the cub is crying and all that, but they don't care. They're just like, yeah, look, see, what I'm saying, where's your mom at? So everything is all nice and dandy until the mom shows up with the dad and the uncle and the auntie, right, and the older brother. And now you see, this ain't no Goldilocks and the Three Bears. You know what I'm saying? This is what's that? Untamed and Uncut. That's what you want on Animal Planet. So So the point is, miserable are you, because the helpless cub that you thought was abandoned indeed was not. And now you're seeing that, okay, its family is now here to protect it, and you were the one that was harming or mistreating it while it was by itself. So in this case, all the nations, particularly Esau, that took advantage, that committed all these atrocities against Israelites in our low state, now that the Lord has returned and having mercy on us, as it says, miserable are they that afflicted thee, and rejoice at thy fall. Miserable are the cities which thy children served, the places we serve captivity. Miserable is she that received thy sons. Receive meaning, like, for example, when we were taken captive to Babylon, Babylon would be like the city that received us, because that's where we went to serve captivity. For as she rejoiced at thy ruin, and was glad of thy fall, so shall she be grieved for her own desolation. And now it's going more specifically into Babylon, okay? And we're gonna see why. As it says, verse 34, and when I say Babylon, Babylon is like a personification of Esau. Just like Jerusalem is a personification of Israel, Babylon is the personification of Esau. So there's sometimes you read about judgments that are pertaining to Babylon, but who are the drivers of that place? Esau. Okay, so it says here, verse 34, for I will take away the rejoicing of her multitude, or her great multitude, and her pride shall be turned into mourning. Why? Because of the judgment that's going to come upon them suddenly. Verse 35, for fire shall come down upon her from the everlasting, long to endure, and she shall be inhabited of devils for a great time. So what does that sound like? Isaiah 34, Isaiah 13, Revelation 18, right? Amongst many other precepts that talk about the destruction of this place of Babylon, and it being inhabited of, desert creatures and demons and all these, so on. Because in some verses you read it does actually mention devils, right? Verse 36, O Jerusalem, look about thee toward the east, and behold the joy that cometh unto thee from God. Lo, thy sons come, whom thou sentest away. They come gathered together from the east to the west by the Holy One, or by the word of the Holy One. So that's a hint, or that's a clue to let you know that these sons, or these that are gathered, is not the whole nation, but the elect, because they're the ones who are going to be gathered from the east to the west, and in being gathered, they're going to be delivered, right, from the destruction. That is the salvation, right? Because now you're actually saved from actual ruin, destruction, and harm. And this is going to be by the word of the Holy One, which is Yahushua. So this also lets us know that this is going to be in this time when the Lord makes his return. It says here, rejoicing in the glory of God. So that's going to be the end goal, the mercy and the blessing the Lord is going to bestow upon us by delivering us, gathering us, and bringing us back to our land. And that brings us to the end of Baruch, the 4th chapter. Lord willing, this was edifying to the elect. In closing, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahushai, Bahasham, Racha, Kodash. Until next time, Shalom.